Okay, so I'm cleaning this screen while my work dries so I can do another layer. And so I've just got like a little glass of water and a kind of a little spongy, pointy thing. Got it in the paint department. And I'm just scrubbing over the area that I have cut out of the paper. Kind of going in circles, and I've got a piece of construction paper under there to soak it up so that I'm not staining my heavy-duty paper that I'm using to protect my work surface. And just kind of scrub it around until you can see the edge of your design pop out, and then wipe away any of the excess with just a clean cloth. And I'm just using a piece of old t-shirt that I cut out and used for rags. And then keep on going. And then I'm just going to set this aside and let it dry while I wait for the fabric to dry, so I can use this screen for the next set. I won't have to cut out another set of stencils, so this should last me until I finish my scarf. Okay, there's one half of the scarf done. So what I decided to do was gonna sew this like into a tube and then finish off the bottoms, so the scarf is only going to be half this wide. So now all I have to do is do the same thing on the other end of the scarf, and then I'll be done. Alright, so this is my screen after I've finished printing all that I'm going to print on my scarf here. And so all I need to do to clean this screen off is just peel the paper backing off, what I used for my stencil, and then go to the sink or something like that and just scrub the paint out with a toothbrush or a nail brush. So this paint, until you set it, is water soluble, so you can use this screen over and over again. And the reason that I did this all like this was because there's another method where you can print similar to this, where you use a stencil, not the screen, but it's on like butcher paper, and you iron that to your fabric, but you have to remake the stencil for every set that you want to print. So if you do it this way, you can get the same design multiple times. And this was just regular printer paper that I used. I didn't get any bleed through the paper. So actually, if I was able to pull this off of here very, very carefully, I could probably use this paper several more times if I wanted to do the same print. But drawing this print was real easy, or I could just use this and I don't know, scan it into the computer and save this as a file. So if I wanted to print it out, then I could use this design again. So I'm going to go ahead and set my ink on my scarf. Now the directions say to let the ink dry for 24 hours. Some of this has dried for several days, because what I did was I did one row and then I let that dry. Then the next day I came in and did the next row, let that dry, and then so basically I did this over about 4 days of printing, just to make sure everything was dried. So the last one I did this morning was at about 11 o'clock this morning. But the layers are really thin and they all feel very, very dry. So I think if you were doing something where you did the micro squeegee thing, like the ink was meant for, where these small little screen stencil prints where you can flood the small area with ink and then run it across with this little stencil. So I don't think it was meant for the size screening that I was doing, so that's why I had to alter my method. But this turned out really cute. I like the way this turned out. So I'm going to go ahead and set the ink, even though I haven't waited the whole 24 hours for everything. So what you're going to use is a pressing cloth. Just, you don't want the ink sticking to your hot iron. So I've laid that down over my stencil, and I'm just going to use a hot iron to the highest temperature setting. I set it for cotton or linen or whatever, but I'm only doing that because this pressing cloth is cotton, and this has got a lot of cotton in it. My scarf does. If you were using some other kind of material, you'd probably want to turn down the temperature so you didn't melt, even though you're using a pressing cloth. So I'm just going to run this over maybe 30 or 45 seconds per section, and it's not going to make it look any different, but your ink will be set. So I'm going to go ahead and finish setting all of the sections, and then I'm going to get ready to sew it, and I'll be back in a minute. Alright, so I finished setting my sections with the pressing cloth and iron, and so now what I've done is I've just folded the right sides of the fabric together. So on this fabric it's easy to tell which the right side. The right side obviously is the side that I printed on, but if you look very, very close at it, I don't know if you can see it in this camera, but just take any t-shirt that you've got and look at it. You can see on the right side these vertical lines in the knit, but if you flip it over, they're more horizontal. The vertical lines aren't as clean looking, so obviously that's your wrong side. So I've just folded it in half, and I'm pinning the edge together. So what I did when I bought this fabric, it was I think 54 inches wide on the bolt, and I just bought what was left on the bolt, and it was slightly over 2 yards. So what I did was I just took the fabric, so say for example this fabric was on the bolt, it was folded in half and then folded over the bolt, like, or wrapped around it like this. So when you unfold it, it's 54 inches wide, but where it's folded at has usually a really prominent fold line that's in the fabric, and I just used that line to cut straight down the whole length of the slightly more than 2 yards of fabric. So, you know, if you want a shorter one, you can just buy shorter fabric, or, you know, you can cut across it and you'd have a 54-inch wide scarf. But so 54 inches divided by 2 is, what, 27-inch wide? I don't do math in my head. And then when I folded that in half, so my fabric was 27 inches wide, so when I get done folding it in half and sewing it, once I get done sewing it, it's probably going to be about 12 inches wide, just over a foot wide. Because what I'm going to do is, this is the cut edge that I cut down the fold line of the fabric, and then this is the selvage edge. And if you see on here these little holes, that's where the pins were when they were knitting this. And so what I'm going to do is sew like a 3/4 inch or a 1 inch seam down here, and then I'm going to cut off all the excess, maybe down to like a 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to overlock the edge with like a zigzag stitch, or I may break out my overlock foot, I don't know. So I'm just going to continue pinning, and then I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and finish it up. Alright, so I finished pinning my fabric, and I had to redo it a couple times to get it to line up straight, because when I cut it, I thought that I had the ends squared off with the rest of the fabric, but I was off by a couple of inches. So what I did was take it and fold it right sides together, and then fold the whole length in half, and then find your center point. On mine was between these two pins, and then I just pinned the two corner ends here, and then just stretched it and pinned until everything met up right. So there's going to be a little bit of pucker, but it's only going to be like a couple of inches of worth across an entire yard. So since it's going to be wound around a neck anyway the whole time, it probably won't be very noticeable. So I'm going to go ahead and find a thread that'll match this. And let's see. I've got, I think this one will match it close enough. Yep. Okay, now I'll get my bobbin. And I don't know if I have a bobbin with this already on it or not. Yep, alright, so I'm going to load my sewing machine up with these threads, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I'm ready to start sewing, so I've loaded up my sewing machine with the right color thread, and I've looked at my selvage edge here, and I think that a 3/4 inch seam will get rid of this selvage edge, so I'll go ahead and sew at the 3/4 inch line, which is this far line on my sewing machine. So you'll just have to see what it is on your sewing machine, or however much I could have gone over. So if you're going to go over more than 3/4 inch, or whatever your last mark is, you can either take a Sharpie and mark that line, or take a piece of tape, or some sewing machines you can use one of these things that's a magnetic, I don't know what it's called, it's magnetic, but it's like a feeding line so that you can line up. My sewing machine here is not magnetic right here, it's only magnetic on this feed dog plate, and so I can maybe get another 1/4 inch. You can see it doesn't want to magnetize or stick to where it should, so I could get maybe another 1/4 inch. Generally I use a piece of tape or a Sharpie marker line and take it off when I get done.